Hey friends, welcome. For much of his life, he didn't just disbelieve in God, he actively resisted the idea of faith. He found it irrational, a crutch for the weak, and something that had no place in a modern, scientific worldview. For him, being an atheist wasn't just a belief, it was part of his identity. He clung to this worldview, armed with arguments against faith, and he was vocal about it. Ironically, the more he searched for meaning in science and self-help and personal success, the more hollow he felt. His journey to Jesus became a process of dismantling his own arguments, a journey that ultimately led him to discover a truth he couldn't deny. Science disproves God. His primary argument was that science made belief in God unnecessary. Evolution and the Big Bang Theory, he believed, explained the origins of life and the universe. To him, science was a complete replacement for faith, and he'd think, why add a God when science already fills in the gaps? But as he dove deeper, especially into cosmology and molecular biology, he began to see the limits of scientific explanations. The fine-tuning of the universe, how physical constants like gravity and the speed of light are exactly what they need to be to support life, left him amazed. Why does the universe operate with such precision? And why is there something rather than nothing? Science could explain the how, but not the why. He realized that science and faith aren't at odds. Science is a way to understand God's creation. The more he learned, the more he sensed the fingerprints of a creator on everything around him. This was his first step towards seeing faith not as the enemy of reason, but as its partner. Religion causes wars and suffering. So he once looked at history and saw religion as the root of much suffering, wars, persecution, and intolerance. How could something so good lead to so much evil? But over time, he realized that it wasn't faith itself, but human misuse of it that caused harm. Wars and suffering happened because people twist ideologies, whether religious, political, or otherwise, for personal power and control. And when he looked closer at Jesus himself, he saw a very different picture. Jesus preached love, forgiveness, and compassion for all people. He spoke against hypocrisy and religious elitism, challenging the powerful and comforting the outcasts. If people truly followed Jesus' teachings, he thought, the world would see more healing than hurting. He came to understand that Jesus' message was never about war or division. It was about unity and peace. The problem wasn't God or faith. It was how people misused both. Why would a good God allow suffering? Now, this question haunted him, especially during personal hardships. He thought, if God exists and is loving, how could he allow so much pain and suffering in the world? For him, the existence of suffering seemed incompatible with a loving God. But then he learned about the concept of free will. God gave humanity the ability to make choices, and unfortunately, people often make choices that harm others. More than that, He realized that God himself isn't distant from human pain. He chose to experience it himself. Jesus' suffering was immense. He knew betrayal, pain, and even death. He realized that God allows suffering, not because he's indifferent, but because through it, people grow, learn, and draw closer to him. Some of the hardest experiences in his life ultimately led to his most profound personal growth as he thought more and more about it. And God doesn't promise a life free from pain, but he promises to be with people in it, offering comfort, guidance, and hope for a future where pain will be no more. The Bible is just an old book. As an atheist, he saw the Bible as an outdated mythological text with no relevance for modern life. But after finally deciding to read it, more out of curiosity than anything else, he was shocked. The Bible addressed human nature, ethics, love, and forgiveness in ways that felt relevant and timeless. It wasn't just a rule book. It was a story about God's love and his desire to be in a relationship with humanity. He was even more surprised by how well the Bible aligned with historical and archaeological findings. Events and locations mentioned in Scripture matched up with external records and prophecies, especially those about Jesus written centuries before his birth. They were strikingly accurate. The Bible wasn't just an old book. It was a living document that had stood the test of time because it speaks to people's deepest needs and questions. Christians are hypocrites. Now, one of his biggest arguments against Christianity was that Christians didn't practice what they preached. He had met people who claimed to follow Jesus but acted in ways that seemed anything but Christ-like. But then he realized something that changed his perspective. Christians aren't perfect. They are people who recognize they need God's help. The church isn't a museum for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. Jesus didn't come for the perfect people. He came for the broken, the lost, and the imperfect. And when he started attending church, he saw people who struggled, who admitted their faults, but who were actively seeking to be better, to love more, and to follow Jesus sincerely. He realized that Christianity isn't about being flawless. It's about following Jesus despite flaws, allowing him to transform people gradually into who they are meant to be. I don't need God to be a good person. For a long time, he thought he was a good person without God. He didn't steal, lie, or harm others intentionally, and he figured that was enough. But as he looked deeper into his own life, he found pride, selfishness, and a sense of emptiness that no amount of good behavior could fill. Doing good is valuable, but it didn't bring him the peace or the purpose he was searching for. He learned that Christianity isn't just about being good. It's about knowing God personally, being loved by him, and allowing his love to change people from the inside out. When he started following Jesus, he experienced a joy and peace that went far beyond just being good. He felt connected to a greater purpose, one that gave his life direction and depth. Following Jesus means losing freedom. He had feared that following Jesus would mean giving up his freedom and individuality. He didn't want to be boxed into a set of religious rules. But what he found was the opposite of restriction. It was liberation. Jesus freed him from the things he didn't believe or even realize were holding him back. Things like fear, pride, the need for approval from others, and the endless search for meaning in temporary things. In surrendering to Jesus, he gained a new kind of freedom, one where he wasn't enslaved by his own doubts and insecurities. He felt secure in his identity as a beloved child of God. Real freedom, he realized, isn't doing whatever he wanted. It's living in alignment with the purpose God has for each person. Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life, and have it to the full." He finally understood what Jesus meant. He found true life and true freedom in him. Now, looking back on this, I can see that God was patient with me, guiding me gently even though I was far from him. My journey from atheism to faith wasn't easy, and I had to wrestle with my doubts. But in Jesus, I found answers, healing, and a love that has transformed my life. You know, if someone is struggling with doubts, I encourage them to seek Jesus with an open heart. Jesus just doesn't want belief. He wants to know each person, to heal them, and to give them a life that's fuller and more meaningful than anything they can ever imagine. Jesus did that for me, and I believe he can do it for others too. Thanks for joining me today, friends, and let me share a little of my story to you. I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll be back tomorrow with more great stuff as usual. I'll be looking for you. Remember, this is my favorite part of every day, the time I get to spend with you, because you are important to me, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow and spend this time with you again. Take care, friends. Talk to you tomorrow.